Hi everybody, Andrew Cuneo here with another deck tech. This time it's going to be on a venture deck in, I guess what I'll call Alchemy version 1.1, which is the first round of buffs that we just received. The buffs were most heavily focused on venture cards, so that's what I wanted to try. The venture cards are focused in three colors: white, green, and black for the most part. At least the more competitive ones are. Red and blue both have some minor venture stuff, but it's really not appealing at all. So I wanted to try out venture, and I wanted to specifically try this card, Dungeon Descent, because it received one of the largest buffs, where instead of coming into play tapped and requiring, I believe, 4 mana to tap, it now only requires 1 mana in tap, and it comes into play untapped. So that's a really big buff to a card. I don't like playing 3-color decks with colorless lands in them. As in Alchemy, I just don't think that your mana winds up being good enough, especially in a somewhat aggressive mid-range creature deck, where in a creature deck in particular, your cards are so much more effective if you get to play them on curve. It's really bad if you're missing a color on turn 2 or turn 3 and it prevents you from playing a spell. So I just don't want to be playing a 3-color deck with a colorless land in my deck. It's just not appealing to me at all. So I had to pick 2 colors to focus on. And I've gone with white-green here. And the main reason for that is that the best legendary creatures with Dungeon Descent in the venture space were Varis and Nadaar. So that's kind of the appeal of doing this. One other thing I'll say is that I wanted to play Inquisitor Captain because I think it's a pretty powerful card actually still. And you have to have a very high creature count for three mana or less creatures to play it, because you need to have 20 or more left between your hand, library, and graveyard, which that means that if you build up a wide board, which this deck tends to do, Inquisitor Captain will stop working because you'll have too many creatures in play if you don't have a really high count in your deck. Also, sometimes your creatures will get exiled, and then that also hinders your creature count. This deck has 31 creatures in it right now, but 4 of them are Inquisitor Captains. So 27 hits is a really comfortable amount to have with Inquisitor Captain. You could go a little bit lower if you wanted to, but I would say you don't really want to go below like 25. The 2 black cards that were mildly appealing to me were Precipitous Drop. That got a big buff. So they shaved 1 off the casting cost, which makes a huge difference. This still has the problem, though, that it's a non-creature card. So it's not going to work with Inquisitor Captain. I mean, you could play a deck that has 4 Precipitous Drops in it and has Inquisitor Captains, but you're going to be able to play almost no other non-creature cards at that point. You'll maybe be able to play like 1 more non-creature card. Fate's Reversal seems fine. They shaved a mana off that one too, but this one really suffers from the Inquisitor Captain problem that I just don't think you could play this card in a deck with Inquisitor Captain. It's just not a strong enough card to be worth cutting into the Inquisitor Captain. And then Triumphant Adventurer is the other card that it got a big buff. It got an additional power. This is a very good card. If the mana was better, I would certainly be playing it. I just don't want to play a deck that has double green cards in it and also has a white-black 2-drop and has a land that taps for colorless. I don't think the mana is good enough to facilitate doing that. So I'm not playing that one. The other card that got a really minor buff is Asarerak. I think this card's just not good. I think that spending 3 mana and the majority of what you're going to get is venturing is just, it's way too bad. So I don't like this card at all. The one exception would be you can use it to generate infinite loops with Paradox Engine in Historic, and so maybe it's got a place there, which the buff had in no way affected your ability to do that. But I think as a card that you're going to try to play like somewhat fairly, where you're going to be casting it with where your advantage you're getting is venturing, and like maybe it eventually gets to stay in play and you're going to plan to attack with it, I think that's just way too weak for Constructed. Before I dive into the actual construction of this deck, I wanted to talk about the dungeons, because that, I think, is actually one of the problems with Asarerak. So I think if you're looking at, how do I show me the dungeons? Okay, here we go. When you play with Venture, you need to decide what dungeon you're going to go into. And I think the decision's actually really, really simple. The Dungeon of the Mad Mage, I think you should almost never go into. It takes too long to complete, and most of the constructed power level, or cards that are inspiring to be constructed power level Venture cards, give you a benefit for finishing dungeons. A-Ellywick does, Nadaar does, Varis does, Asarerak does. This is the longest dungeon. It's the hardest to complete. So I think you should just almost never go into this one because it's going to delay your getting payoffs from your cards for too long. Also, the first room is awful. Gaining 1 life is almost nothing. And a lot of the other rooms are honestly pretty bad. Even the final payoff Mad Wizard's Lair room, where you're going to draw 3 cards and get to play one without paying its mana cost, that's really powerful, but in a very different kind of deck, and I think a kind of deck that the cards don't support at all. But, you need to have some really great, really expensive card you're hoping to find to do that, and I just don't think those cards make any sense with the other Venture cards. So I would say almost never go in the Dungeon of the Mad Mage. I would only do it if you really want to gain a life that turn. Or if you're, for some reason, really hoping to complete multiple dungeons to make your A-Ellywick emblem bigger. So that's, I think, the worst dungeon overall. This is the best dungeon. You should be going into this one almost all the time. Scry as your initial payoff is good. Even the second room, like getting a treasure early on in the game is a pretty big deal. Also, getting a 1/1 can be good. The third rooms aren't that great. The fourth room, drawing a card's obviously a good payoff, and you also finish a dungeon, which just finishing a dungeon should be a pretty substantial payoff in a Venture deck. This one is another one that people seem to really like, but I think this dungeon is really bad. So each player loses a life. That's really minor benefit. Then most people go through Veils of Fear and Sandfall Cell, which both have a Punisher mechanic attached to them where your opponent might lose 2 life or they might have to give up on a resource. And just in general, in Constructed, people are always going to find a way to have this not hurt them very much, or at least early on in the game, it's just not going to affect them in any way. If you go through the first 3 rooms and they lose 5 life, that honestly might have no effect on the game at all. Sometimes if you're really, really ahead and you're just looking to finish the game as fast as possible, it might make sense to go into this dungeon. But in general, this dungeon has the absolute worst rooms, I think. Obviously, Oubliette is the worst room in any of the dungeons, but I think that like Trapped Entry, Veils of Fear, and Sandfall Cell are probably all in the top 5 or 6 worst possible rooms to go into in a dungeon. If you actually get to finish this dungeon, getting the 4/4 is obviously a very big payoff, but the other rooms I think are just so bad, you should just not go into this dungeon almost ever. The rooms are just really, really underpowered. I would have honestly liked to see them rebalance Venture by making this dungeon a little bit better. I think that would have gone a lot of the way to making this mechanic more appealing and constructed. But they didn't do that, so mostly try to avoid the Tomb of Annihilation. It's really bad. All right, now let's go through the actual construction of this deck. It's a Venture deck, obviously, so we've got Varis and Nadaar, 2 good 3-drops that deal with venturing. Neither one of them got a buff. They're still the same card they were before, but they were pretty close to being constructed power level before anyway. So maybe some other cards around them getting a buff is going to be what pushes them over the top. One of the cards that got a buff that has to do with Venture is A-Ellywick Tumblestrum. It went from a -7 for its ultimate to a -6. The ultimate is really powerful once you've completed a dungeon, obviously. Giving all of your creatures trample, haste, and +2/+2 is pretty amazing. That's probably going to be enough to end the game. Also, this is just, it's a 4-mana Planeswalker that this deck is capable of ramping into play on turn 3, and it's going to have 5 loyalty, assuming you plus it. So it can ultimate very quickly, and it has a very high loyalty. So it's actually a pretty good card, I would say. Even the -2 ability, which you may not want to do all that often because you really do want to get the emblem off of this, -2 ability is a powerful ability too in a deck full of creatures. So I think this is just a good card, minor buff, so it's pretty appealing. Inquisitor Captain is obviously not a venture card, and it is a card that actually got nerfed a little bit, but not in a way that's relevant to this deck. But the main payoff of this card is that it goes and it gets you your venture 3-drops more often, which is pretty appealing. So a lot of the time, this card is going to come with venture attached to it because you're going to get a Nadaar, you might get a A-Cloister Gargoyle. If you get a Varis, you don't get to venture right away, but if you can then play a creature after the Inquisitor Captain, you will get to venture. So this does help with the venturing for sure. There are some Augur of Autumns in this deck, which is a card I like a lot. It hasn't seen a lot of constructed play because it kind of wants to be in a mid-range creature deck, which has not been very popular in constructed formats of late. But if this deck's going to be good, it's going to be a mid-range creature deck that's its identity, basically. So I think you really want Augur of Autumn in this deck because you want to be playing more than one card a turn, and if you don't have a card like Augur of Autumn, you're going to run out of cards. And you're not going to be able to play more than one card a turn, which means you're not going to be triggering your Varis every turn. You can't just have a turn where you draw and you play a Prosperous Innkeeper on turn 5. That's not going to be good enough. You need something to make it so you're doing more than that with each of your turns. Like I said, there's Prosperous Innkeepers, Jaspera Sentinel, so some amount of mana ramp, and they're also just creatures that work with Inquisitor Captain. They work with getting Coven for the Augur of Autumn. They trigger Varis, so that's all very nice. One Trelasarra in the deck, which is partially because you need to have a decent number of legendaries if you want to be able to use your Dungeon Descent. Also, there's Prosperous Innkeepers, which the feed into the life gain, which allows you to get Scry, which helps you with the Augur of Autumn, or just generally making sure that you're having a good play every turn. So that's a nice one of. I don't know that I would play more than one of that. 4 A-Cloister Gargoyles, which obviously fits into the venturing theme. This is a card that had the casting cost reduced by 1, which is a very big buff. It also lost a toughness, which is kind of whatever. A-Cloister Gargoyle in particular is nice with Jaspera Sentinel because one of the things you need to have in a deck with Jaspera Sentinel is you need other cheap creatures that you want to play that you're not going to be unhappy if you can't attack with them on turn 3 because you're getting mana out of them. So certainly A-Cloister Gargoyle, it's going to have 0 power on turn 3. You don't really care that you can't attack with it. You're happy to tap it for mana with the Sentinel. Same thing with the Prosperous Innkeeper. Less so with Trelasarra because you are giving up damage if you're not attacking with Trelasarra, but it is only 2 damage, so that's fine. There's 2 Katildas in the deck to help with the mana ramping. This is not a great Katilda deck because it does not have that many humans in it. A lot of the creatures are not humans. But Katilda does have one really nice clause, protection from werewolves. I think werewolves is probably the most popular deck on the ladder right now. So just having a 2-drop that's really effective at blocking their werewolves, you're going to, potentially prevent 3-6 damage with this in a game. Also, this deck is sort of designed to stall out the ground, so the 6-mana tap ability is a way to give you an advantage once you get into a board stall. What other creatures haven't we talked about? Kazandu Mammoth is really only in the deck to make sure you have enough creatures that your Inquisitor Captain stays triggered or stays active later on in the game. There's Brutal Cathars as your only removal in the main deck. I think that it's really important if you're going to play with Jaspera Sentinel to bias your mana heavily towards green so that you can play it on turn 1. So I'm playing Brutal Cathar instead of something like Skyclave Apparition, which would be a double white spell. I really wanted to avoid double white spells in the construction of this deck. And so that's why there's Brutal Cathars as opposed to Skyclave Apparitions. Also, it's nice if you're playing in a really heavy werewolf meta. Brutal Cathar's arguably better anyway, because most of the time the werewolf decks don't have a ton of removal spells, and when you flip back to Moonrage Brute, that's potentially a very good blocker for you, and then their deck's probably designed so it's going to flip day to night once or twice in the course of a game, and so you might get to exile 2 creatures off the Brutal Cathar just through the functioning of their deck. You don't even necessarily need to do much to play around the day-night cycle. That's just going to happen as just a direct function of the way their deck works, especially if they have Tovolar. So that's the main deck. There's the 12 good dual lands, Dungeon Descent like I talked about, some basics, 1 Lair of the Hydra. I wouldn't play with a ton of Lair of the Hydras in this deck just because you generally have stuff to do with your mana every turn when your deck's functioning, and you don't produce a tremendous amount of mana, so your Lair of the Hydra is never going to really get huge. Looking at the sideboard, there's some removal spells in case you play against dragons, Valorous Stance, and Tangle Trap. Namely, you do need to be really careful when you sideboard with this deck to make sure that you still have enough creature hits for Inquisitor Captain. So the way the main deck is built, you can shave on, I would say, maybe 3 or 4 creatures as you're sideboarding to add non-creature cards to your deck, but you don't really want to push beyond that. So if you were going to board in, the 3 Valorous Stances and Tangle Trap, you could probably shave on Augur of Autumn, maybe shave on Trelasarra, maybe Prosperous Innkeepers, some cards like that to get those 4 in there. You also might want to cut A-Ellywick Tumblestrum against the Dragon's deck because it's a little bit harder to keep alive in that matchup. But you don't want to have just 8 non-creature cards that you're trying to board into your deck. It's going to make the Inquisitor Captain stop working. Beyond that, against the Werewolves deck, I want to try these Averbrook Caretakers. I think that it's a really good way to punish them for having it be night. And it's just a very hard card for them to attack through because it really, really gums up the ground. So that's where I'm planning to bring in the Caretakers. In that matchup, I'll probably take out the A-Ellywick Tumblestrums for the Caretakers. Especially if you're on the draw, it can be hard to keep A-Ellywick Tumblestrum alive. It's pretty easy for them to attack it with haste creatures and kill it. Another Brutal Cathar against Werewolves. Against the blue decks, it's really nice you get to board in Toski. I think Toski is a card that sees a kind of indirect improvement from the nerf to Divide by Zero. I think Divide by Zero is going to be a lot less played. And that was one of the main ways that like a blue-white control deck could keep Toski under control. Assuming that they're cutting their Divide by Zeros, it's going to be very hard for them to get Toski off the board. And Toski's just insane against creatureless decks if they can't remove it. So I'm happy to play with Toski. Also, it's a legendary, which works with Dungeon Descent, which is a very minor synergy. Then, to help against Key to the Archive, we've got some Reidanes and an Outland Liberator. Also 1 Ranger class, just to give you an effect that, it doesn't get swept away, basically. And there's a 4th A-Ellywick Tumblestrum. This is, I think, in particular to play against Sanguine Brushstroke style decks where you need to be able to accrue an advantage on something that doesn't just get swept up by Meathook Massacre. So that's where I'm planning to try that. So that's the deck. Let's go ahead and get into some games. All right. I think this hand is a mulligan. This is certainly the problem with playing colorless lands in your deck. I can't cast any of my spells, even though I have 3 lands. Also, I don't have any 1 or 2 drops, and I'm on the draw, which is problematic in and of itself. All right, this is a much better hand. I think I need to keep all my lands. Certainly want to keep my 2-drop and my 3-drop. So which of these 4 drops is going to be better? Not knowing what my opponent is playing, I'm going to guess it's going to be Inquisitor Captain. Also, the Inquisitor Captain is a creature that allows me to trigger Varis Silverymoon, whereas the A-Ellywick Tumblestrum would not. So this appears to be some sort of control deck. Let's see. Yes. Do you have an answer for the Silverymoon? Joy Disruption. All right. When it's possible, I like to play the Augur on a turn where I'm not already going to have made my land drop. This game may already kind of be out of reach, sadly. When the control decks get to be on the play and they get to curve an answer for your 2 and your 3 drop, it gets really hard to win. Yeah, this one's looking pretty doomed. Alright, I'll get a Scry and put this Cloister Gargoyle on the bottom of my deck, hopefully revealing a land. I've revealed yet another Cloister Gargoyle. Pretty disappointing. So this game is going to be a complete slaughter. They still have Divide by 0. Interesting. It's possible it's just right for the blue decks to keep playing Divide by 0. All right, we're descending into the dungeon. Excellent. I guess I should start with the Inquisitor Captain. It's possible I want to use the Sentinel for mana. Yeah, I'm going to send the Sentinel at the Teferi, which is overkill, but there's a decent chance this Augur of Autumn is going to die. And I'll maybe be happy that I dealt 1 point to Teferi. They've got an Approach of the Second Sun. I'm probably going to die to the Approach of the Second Sun, but I'm still definitely of the belief that Approach of the Second Sun is not actually a powerful card to get off of the Key to the Archive. Like, I was going to lose this game basically regardless of what they got off of that key. If they had gotten, you know, any card that killed the creature, it would have been good enough. Yeah, let's just concede. All right. That was not an impressive showing. But I do have a lot of sideboard options for this matchup. So I think I want the Toskis. I think A-Ellywick Tumblestrum is fine. Liberator's good. Ranger class is good. I could have a card like Valorous Stance in my deck if I really wanted to. It's possible that they have Lair or Hullbreaker Horror. I think I'm not going to do that, though. Let's cut all the Brutal Cathars. That's an easy one. I think Trelasarra is pretty weak. Maybe a Katilda, too. I still have a lot of low-impact mana ramping creatures in my deck. That's just kind of what my deck is. It's a little bit unfortunate. I could maybe try to play, like, oh, I want Reidanes 100%. Let's get those in there, too. Maybe trim a Sentinel and an Innkeeper. All right, let's look at the creature count. We still have 33 creatures, and we've got 6 that don't work with the captain. So we're still at 27. That's a healthy amount. I think that's fine. All right. Let's hope this goes better. I do get to be on the play this game. So I have a turn 1 Sentinel, but not necessarily turn 2 Gargoyle because of the Crossroads. I'm going to hope to draw Plains. Wow, that was a really bad draw. It's both not a land that allows me to cast my 2-drop and also is a tap land. Honestly, it couldn't have been worse. Don't really want to just march Nadaar into Jwar Disruption here. So I'm going to try to play an Innkeeper and a Cloister Gargoyle, or an Innkeeper and a Nadaar. Yeah, I'll play this. This means that if I draw a... If I don't draw an untapped land, I'm not going to be able to play A-Ellywick next turn. But I think that's fine. I think I'll be happy if I just play Nadaar next turn. It's pretty likely whatever I play is going to be divided by 0 anyway. Okay. Might be worth killing that with the Lair of the Hydra. So I can't venture twice because I didn't draw a land. I can venture once though. Oh, but I can't go into the storeroom because I went the wrong route. More to fairies. This has been kind of rough. My lands really did not cooperate very well this game. So they are a Lear deck. Seems like they're very, very likely to play a sweeper. So let's just play an A-Ellywick Tumblestrum. Should I actually go into this dungeon? I've already finished the other one. I think it's still better to do this dungeon. All right, we're dealing a little bit of damage at least. More Teferis. I have to be getting swept this turn, right? Yeah, okay. See if they can get A-Ellywick off the board before it ultimates. If it ultimates, I actually think I'm in okay shape to win this game. Fortunately, they're probably just going to Vanishing Verse it now. Or they could divide by 0 it. That'd be kind of bad for me too. Yeah, that counts as pretty bad. Really fully enjoying the divide by 0 experience. Come on, all lands. Even if they have all lands, they still are going to have the Celestus. So they won't have all lands for long. The Tumblestrum, it's back. Okay. There's been a lot of life gained this game. Come on, have nothing. Nothing. Could go for nothing. Yeah, that's honestly kind of close to nothing. Nothing that can kill the Tumblestrum. The Tumblestrum is immune. Please don't kill the Tumblestrum. Wow, their hand must be really good if they're discarding this Meathook Massacre. It makes me feel like I have no hope. I guess they kept on land, though. Regrowth divide by 0. Okay. They're going to stop the Tumblestrum again? Wait, they don't have enough mana to stop the emblem. No, they do have enough mana. I see. But they didn't choose to? That doesn't seem like a good idea on their part. I guess I can divide by 0 the Meathook Massacre still. Yeah, they definitely should have divided by 0 Meathook Massacre. I probably should have, on my turn, I should have just played a second Tumblestrum and a Kazandu Mammoth to hedge against the divide by 0. Alright, Lair's going to be annoying, but maybe not impossible to beat. Certainly if they're doing that with their Lair, it's going to be possible to beat it. I think I don't want to attack there. I want to make sure I get the venture one more time. Of course, they're just going to Vanishing Verse. Yeah, that didn't work at all. I should have just taken the 7 damage. Would I be winning here if I just dealt 7 damage last turn? Maybe. I still might win, honestly, just because the Lair of the Hydra is going to be the real deal next turn. Yeah, I think I definitely would have won if I just played the previous turn better. What kind of stuff do they have left here? Bunch of Divide by Zeros, Fading Hope. That's not good for me. Why didn't they play Fading Hope on the... That has to have been a misclick. Now what? They can recast Mascot Exhibition. And I think they maybe live another turn if they do that, but they're going to be forced to block a lot. That, I don't think, helps them to live hardly at all. This is one of those spots where the nerf to Lair really matters a lot. There's no way I would have beaten Lair if they could cast spells on my turn. I guess I could get a Vanishing Verse here, and that would be bad for me. And they knew the top card of their deck when they cycled. They're dividing their own key. I think this turn has not gone according to their plan. Maybe they have Fading Hope? And they could live? I don't know. Gonna annihilate them some more. Oh, this is one of those spots where the Lair not being able to activate it for X is 0 actually hurts me. It's funny. Hasty Trample, 5/5 Toski, not bad. So they're forced to chump, and I get to draw a card, and I'm going to get to recast Cloister Gargoyle. This has been a weird game. Dicks. It's kind of bad for me. Not sure. I guess they're going to get a removal spell that can kill the Cloister Gargoyle. And maybe they'll feel like they're in okay shape from that point. Although they still need an answer to the Lair of the Hydra. That seems like an out-of-order sequencing kind of play. If you're going to play the tutor, I would think you'd want to minus Teferi first, just in case you see the card that was whatever the best card you could tutor for is. That way you'd get your best card and your second best card. There are some times when you would want to do it in the other order, where you'd want to see what you're getting off of Teferi and then decide to tutor for whatever you feel like you're missing. But I think in this spot, they're about to die, so they just need the best two possible cards, so they should do it in the other order. That was a really crazy game. I can't believe I won. All right, so I did see that they had two Leirs that game. The one they discarded earlier and the second one that they played. So I could conceivably play with Valorous Stance, but basically all of their removal was -X, -X, or exile effects. So I can't really use the Indestructible ability because it doesn't work against Vanishing Verse, doesn't work against Flunk. I guess they had one Infernal Grasp that doesn't work against Medoc Massacre. I think I'm going to play one copy of Valorous Stance, but certainly not a card I'm going to want to draw multiple copies of, especially early in the game. They have mulled to 4. I can probably beat them all to 4. I want a Toski. I already have one in my hand, so probably not. Be nice to get a 2-drop or 4th land. Or a Forest. Forest is nice too. I'll probably play Reidane next turn. Just because that's the turn that it will be impactful against a Key to the Archive. It seems kind of likely to get Jawar disruptioned or to die somehow, but maybe it doesn't. All right, it seems like it didn't. That's nice. Certainly. Hit Fading Hope. I do have access to Valorous Stance here, but like I said, it's really unlikely that I can save something by making it indestructible. Trying to make me discard to hand size. Land is fine. I'll be untapping this land probably so I can play a 4-drop and a 3-drop next turn. Alright, the Reidane kind of did its job in that it forced my opponent to, you know, fight through them before they could start deploying their game plan. So that's nice, I guess. What do you got for me? A land. They've stopped the tumble-strumming. I guess I should attack first. I know I said it was really bad to go into this dungeon in the deck tech, but these games have been kind of odd. I was not expecting to play games where I'd want to get beginning +4/+4 from A-Ellywick Tumblestrum. Maybe it would be better to have one of the Valorous Stances in my sideboard be a Fateful Absence, because in a matchup like this, the Fateful Absence could hit both Lair and Teferi, which would be kind of nice. I don't know why I didn't think it was worth discarding a land there. Obviously, I'm never going to play all these lands. What life are they at? So I can do 11, and I can venture twice. That's not really, that's not quite enough. I don't think I have lethal. What the heck is going on? Oh, I only need to discard 2 cards. Wow. Bargain. Yeah, they needed to both sweep the board and get rid of A-Ellywick Tumblestrum and answer the Lair of the Hydra. That was not a spot they were coming back from. Not a horrible hand. Is it maybe a Dragon's deck or like a red-blue control deck? Oh, I guess it could also be a red-black Werewolves deck. That is another deck people play. I think I'm not even going to play the Jaspera Sentinel here. I just want to guarantee myself a turn 3 Inquisitor Captain. I like the Sedgemoor Witch because it makes it really unlikely that they're playing with Meathook Massacre type sweepers in their deck. I don't think the 1/1s are going to really do much of anything. Should I play this turn, or should I wait a turn? Could just go Innkeeper Cloister Gargoyle this turn. Seems reasonable. This is probably free damage. I think they're very unlikely to block. I want Dungeon Descent. Yeah, I think that's actually fine. I would be better off, probably, had I played the Jaspera Sentinel on turn 2. But I might not. I might not have been. If they might have just Igneous Inspirationed it on their third turn instead of playing the Sedgemoor Witch, which I think would have put me in a worse spot. Sadly, I don't have any legendary creatures in play. I will next turn, though. They are playing with Meathook Massacre. What kind of a maniac plays Meathook Massacre in a deck with Sedgemoor Witch? That's what I want to know. The Tumblestrum would just get hit by a Den of the Bugbear if I cast it. I've done it. I've constructed a goblin that can perfectly block the Den of the Bugbear. My deck does not like playing against Meathook Massacre at all. Well, that was about the only card that could possibly give me a hope of continuing the game. It's the first time I've ever seen A-Cloister Gargoyle killed by start from scratch. I didn't enjoy it. Yeah, that's probably enough of that. So I think I'm going to try having the Caretakers in my deck instead of the A-Ellywick Tumblestroms. I think I'm going to play like 2 Valorous Stances, no Brutal Cathars. Like the Toskis as well. Maybe 1 less. Prosperous Innkeeper. What's my creature count now? 36, but I'm minus 8. So 28. So I've got plenty of non-creature, or plenty of cheap creature cards. It seems fine. I could honestly have Ranger class on my deck too. Maybe I want that over Trelasarra. My opponent, I believe, had already double mulliganed, and I guess their last hand was not to their liking, so they went for the concession instead of trying to play 4 or 5 cards. I will take a mulligan. This is a much better hand. I'm going to ditch the Innkeeper. Certainly don't need 2 6-drops to start the game. I think I want the Scry this turn because ideally I'm going to play Nadaar next turn. That would be kind of best possible. Mostly because I want the treasure from the second dungeon so I can get to the Caretaker faster, because I think that the Caretaker is really my plan for winning this game. It's fine. Definitely not going to be sacking my land anytime soon. You're going to get to see if their deck can beat a turn 5 Averbrook Caretaker. Be a little bit surprised if they can. I suppose if they have Meathook Massacre this turn, they can. But you would think if they had Meathook Massacre, they might not have Igneous Inspiration with my 0-3. Is this just going face? No, it's just gaining them life, getting them another land. I'm going to put the counters on the wolf because it will survive and beat Hook Massacre, whereas a 5/5 Averbook Caretaker may not. Oh, but I was making it night. Maybe I should have put the counter on the Caretaker. Yeah, that was a mistake where I put that counter. All right. That seemed like two not very good matchups, and I won both of them. Obviously, I got the benefits of them having to mulligan a lot in one game in each match, but that's part of Magic. Anyway, hope you guys find that deck interesting, and please sub to the channel. I'll be posting some more deck techs with the new Alchemy changes in the coming days, and if you don't want to miss it, go ahead and hit the sub button. Thanks for watching.